Captain Sung-ho stared at the massive crystal structure rising from the alien desert like a frozen scream. The surface of Kepler 442c stretched endlessly in all directions, covered in red sand that sparkled with tiny fragments of some unknown metal. His ship, the UES Horizon's Edge, sat behind him like a silver needle against the orange sky, its hull gleaming in the light of the distant binary stars. "Sir, the readings are off the charts," said Dr. Hai-Jin as she approached with her scanning equipment. Her face was flushed with excitement beneath her helmet's transparent visor. "This structure is at least 3 million years old, maybe older. The material composition doesn't match anything in our database." Sung-ho nodded and activated his comm unit. "Commander Tae-min, what's the status on the perimeter?" The gruff voice of his military liaison crackled through the radio. "All clear, Captain. No signs of life anywhere within 50 kilometers. This place is dead as a doorknob." The crystal tower stretched almost 200 meters into the thin atmosphere, its surface covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. Hai-Jin had been studying similar structures across the galaxy for the past 5 years, but nothing compared to this one. The others were ruins, broken fragments of some lost civilization, but this tower looked like it had been built yesterday. "Dr. Hai-Jin, can you make sense of these symbols?" Sung-ho asked, pointing to the glowing marks near the base of the structure. She knelt down and ran her gloved fingers over the patterns. The moment her hand touched the crystal surface, the entire tower began to hum with a low resonant tone that seemed to vibrate through their bones. Both humans stepped back quickly, hands moving instinctively to their sidearms. "That's never happened before," Hai-Jin whispered. The other structures were completely inert. The humming grew louder, and the symbols began to pulse with a soft blue light. More patterns appeared along the tower's surface, racing upward like liquid electricity. Within moments, the entire structure was alive with dancing lights and complex geometric designs. "Tae-min, get over here now," Sung-ho barked into his comm. The commander's boots crunched across the sand as he jogged toward them, his rifle held, ready. He was a stocky man with graying hair and the steady eyes of someone who had seen too much combat. "What did you two do?" "Nothing," Hai-Jin protested. "I just touched it." The tower's humming reached a crescendo, then suddenly stopped. The silence that followed was more unsettling than the noise had been. Then, without warning, a section of the crystal wall simply vanished, revealing a dark opening that led into the structure's interior. "Well, that's not ominous at all," Tae-min muttered, raising his weapon. Sung-ho pulled out his flashlight and stepped toward the entrance. "We came here to explore. Let's explore." The interior of the tower was unlike anything they had expected. Instead of rough crystal walls, they found themselves in a smooth corridor, lined with panels of some metallic substance that reflected their lights in strange, shifting patterns. The air was warm and breathable, according to their sensors, though they kept their helmets on as a precaution. "Captain, you need to see this," Hai-Jin called from ahead. They rounded a corner and found themselves in a vast circular chamber. The walls rose up into darkness above them, covered with thousands of panels that flickered with faint lights. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, holding what looked like a sphere made of the same crystal as the exterior walls. "It's beautiful," Hai-Jin breathed. As they approached the pedestal, the sphere began to glow more brightly. The panels on the walls started activating one by one, displaying complex diagrams and star charts. But what made Sung-ho's blood run cold was the fact that he could read some of the text. "That's Korean," he said quietly. "What?" Tae-min stepped closer to examine the nearest wall panel. Those symbols, mixed in with the alien writing, they're ancient Korean characters. Sung-ho's voice was barely a whisper. "But that's impossible. This structure predates human civilization by millions of years." Hai-Jin was frantically scanning everything with her equipment. "The dating is consistent, Captain. This place was built long before humans even existed on Earth." The sphere pulsed once, then projected a hologram into the air above their heads. The image was fuzzy at first, but gradually resolved into the figure of a man wearing unfamiliar clothing. He appeared to be human, with Asian features and dark hair, but something about him seemed different, older somehow. When the figure began to speak, all three humans froze in shock. The voice was clear and spoke in perfect Korean. "If you are hearing this message, then our people have returned to the stars," the hologram said. "My name is Jun Sik, and I serve as the final commander of the Terran Deep Survey Fleet. If you have found this beacon, it means the time of hiding is over." Sung-ho felt his knees go weak. Terran? As in Terra? As in Earth? The hologram continued as if it could hear him. "We knew this day would come. The children of Terra would eventually rediscover their heritage and return to reclaim what was always theirs. But you must be warned. The galaxy is not as empty as it seems. There are others here, races that have built their civilizations on the foundations we left behind. They will not welcome your return." The image flickered and changed, showing star maps and technical diagrams. "We have prepared for your arrival. Across the galaxy, we have hidden caches of knowledge and technology that will help you understand your true history. But beware, for we were not the only ones who survived the Great War. Our enemies still wait in the darkness between galaxies, and they too will return when the beacons awaken." The hologram began to fade. "Remember who you are, children of Terra. Remember that you were the first to walk among the stars, and you will be the last to surrender them. The galaxy awaits your return, but it will not be the peaceful homecoming you might expect. The ancient ways must be restored, and the balance must be maintained. May your journey bring you wisdom and strength." The image vanished, leaving the three humans standing in stunned silence. The chamber's lights gradually dimmed, but the sphere continued to pulse with a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat. "This changes everything," Hyejin whispered. Taemin was the first to recover his composure. "We need to report this to Earth Command immediately." "Report what?" Sung-ho asked. "That we found evidence that humans have been traveling the stars for millions of years. That we're apparently the descendants of some ancient galactic civilization. That there are enemies waiting for us somewhere in deep space. They'll think we've lost our minds. Then we bring back proof," Hyejin said, already moving toward the walls to document everything. "These panels, the star charts, the technology, we catalog everything and take it back with us." As she worked, Sung-ho noticed that more panels were activating throughout the chamber. Each one displayed different information, star maps of sectors he didn't recognize, technical specifications for technologies that were far beyond human understanding, and more text in that mixture of Korean and alien symbols. "There's something else," he said, studying one particular panel. "These coordinates, they're not random, they're showing us the locations of other beacons." Taemin joined him at the display. "How many?" "Dozens, maybe hundreds, all across the galaxy." Sung-ho felt a chill run down his spine. If this Junsik was telling the truth, then our ancestors left markers everywhere they went. We're looking at a treasure map to humanity's lost empire. The implications were staggering. If humans had once controlled significant portions of the galaxy, then every alien civilization they had encountered so far might be living on what was once human territory. The Galactic Council, the trade routes, the colonial boundaries, all of it might be built on the ruins of humanity's original expansion. "We need to get this information back to Earth," Sung-ho decided. "But first, we download everything we can from this beacon." "Dr. Hyejin, how long do you need?" "Give me 6 hours. I want to make sure we don't miss anything important." As his team worked to document their discovery, Sung-ho stood before the central sphere and wondered what other secrets lay hidden among the stars. The galaxy suddenly felt much larger and much more dangerous than it had when they first arrived on this dead world. But it also felt like home in a way he couldn't quite explain. The children of Terra were finally coming home. The Galactic Council chamber on Proxima Station buzzed with the voices of 100 different species, but Ambassador Kyung-soo felt completely alone as he stood at the central podium. The massive dome above him displayed the swirling colors of the Vortex Nebula, while representatives from across known space filled the tiered seating that surrounded him in a perfect circle. "The human delegation presents fabricated evidence," declared Zorthak Prime Minister Veltar, his forearms gesturing dismissively. The insectoid alien's translator rendered his clicks and whistles into standard galactic common. These claims of ancient heritage are desperate attempts to gain status among civilized races. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. The Xanthari representative, a tall figure wrapped in flowing robes, stood gracefully. Ambassador Kyung-soo, your species has been traveling the stars for barely 50 years. The Xanthari Empire has maintained detailed records for over 10,000 years. There is no mention of any human presence before your recent expansion from the Sol system. Kyung-soo activated his holographic display, showing the crystal structures and the star maps they had recovered from Kepler 442c. Honored delegates, I understand your skepticism, but the evidence is clear. The dating analysis confirms these structures are millions of years old, and the genetic markers found within them match human DNA perfectly. Genetic markers can be fabricated, sneered the Vorthak Collective spokesman, a being that looked like a walking tree with too many eyes. Your technology is primitive, but not so primitive that such deception is beyond your capabilities. The debate had been going on for 3 hours, and Kyung-soo was losing ground with every exchange. The established powers of the galaxy had built their authority on being the eldest races, the ones who had guided younger species toward civilization. The idea that humans might predate them all was not just surprising, it was threatening to their very identity. While Kyung-soo faced ridicule on Proxima Station, Captain Do-hyun was leading a small fleet of human ships toward the second beacon location. The coordinates from the first site had led them to a dead system on the edge of Xanthari space, where 3 lifeless planets orbited a dying red giant star. Sensors are picking up the same crystal composition on the second planet, reported his science officer, Lieutenant Hai-wan. The structure is smaller than the one on Kepler 442c, but definitely the same technology. Do-hyun studied the readings on his command display. Any signs of Xanthari activity in the system? Negative, sir. According to their charts, this system has been marked as uninhabitable for the past 2,000 years. They avoid it completely. Then let's see why. The shuttle landed near a cluster of crystalline spires that rose from a crater in the planet's surface like frozen lightning. Unlike the single tower they had found before, this site contained dozens of structures arranged in a complex pattern that reminded Do-hyun of a circuit board. When the landing party approached the central spire, it activated immediately. The same blue light raced along the crystal surfaces, and the same humming sound filled the thin air. But this time the activation triggered something else. Captain, we're getting massive energy readings from across the system, Hai-wan called from the shuttle. The other planets are lighting up like Christmas trees. Through his binoculars, Do-hyun could see similar lights appearing on the distant worlds. The entire system was awakening, responding to their presence like a vast machine coming online after eons of sleep. The central spire projected its hologram, but instead of Junsik, they were greeted by a different figure. This one was clearly ancient, with white hair and deep lines around his eyes, but his bearing was that of a leader who had seen too much. I am Jin Woo, keeper of the second archive, the figure announced in Korean. If you have reached this place, then the awakening has begun. But you must understand, children of Terra, that your return will not go unnoticed. Even now, the systems we built are reporting your presence to those who have claimed our legacy. The hologram gestured, and new displays appeared showing star charts marked with warning symbols. The races that call themselves the elders of this galaxy have built their civilizations on the ruins of our cities. They use our technology without understanding it, claim our achievements as their own, and rule territories that were once under Terran protection. Do-hyun felt a chill that had nothing to do with the planet's cold atmosphere. What happened to the original human civilization? War, Jinwoo replied simply. A civil war that tore apart everything we had built. Brother fought brother across 1,000 worlds until we were forced to choose between destroying our legacy and allowing it to fall into the wrong hands. We chose destruction, but some of us escaped to the far reaches of the galaxy to preserve what we could. The image changed, showing vast fleets of ships disappearing into the void between galaxies. The tyrannical faction that started the war was banished to the empty spaces beyond our borders, but they swore they would return when the time was right. That time is now, children of Terra. Your awakening of the beacons sends signals that travel far beyond this galaxy. Back on Proxima Station, Kyung-soo was still arguing with skeptical aliens when his communication device began buzzing urgently. The message from Do-hyun was brief but earth-shattering. Ambassador, we've activated a second beacon. The entire system is coming online, and there are dozens more throughout the galaxy. But we're not alone out here. Something is responding to the signals. The debate in the council chamber stopped when every delegate's personal communicator began, chiming simultaneously. Reports were flooding in from across the galaxy of ancient systems suddenly activating, of technology that had been dormant for millennia beginning to function again, and of mysterious energy signatures appearing in previously empty sectors of space. What have you done? Demanded the Zenthari representative, her usual composure cracking. Kyung-soo looked around the chamber at the sea of alien faces, many of them showing fear for the first time since he had arrived. We've come home. The next few days brought chaos to galactic civilization. On the Vorthak homeworld, ancient irrigation systems that had been dead for centuries began pumping water again, but only in response to human genetic codes. Zenthari military bases found their defensive grids activating and reconfiguring themselves according to protocols no one could remember creating. Most disturbing of all were the reports from deep space monitoring stations of massive objects moving in the void between galaxies, heading toward the outer rim at impossible speeds. Dr. Mi-young worked frantically in her laboratory aboard the human research vessel Endeavour, analyzing samples from the beacon sites. The genetic evidence was overwhelming and undeniable, but it raised more questions than it answered. The DNA markers are definitely human, she reported to the emergency session of Earth's leadership. But they show genetic variations that we don't see in the modern human population. It's as if our ancestors were more genetically diverse than we are now. More diverse how? Asked Admiral Park, Earth's senior military commander. Enhanced cognitive capacity, improved physical resilience, longer lifespans. It's like looking at the genetic code of a species that was deliberately improved over thousands of years of selective breeding and genetic modification. Meanwhile, Captain Do-hyun's fleet had reached a third beacon site, this one hidden in an asteroid field that showed clear signs of artificial construction. The asteroids had been hollowed out and connected by massive tunnels lined with the same crystalline technology they were becoming familiar with. When they activated this beacon, they got their first glimpse of the true scope of humanity's ancient civilization. The hologram that appeared was not a single figure, but an entire council of humans representing different factions and worlds. We are the final council of Terra, they announced in unison. If you have reached this far, then you have seen the awakening of our network. But know this, children of our blood. The path ahead is not one of easy victory. The species that have inherited our galaxy will not yield their power willingly. One council member stepped forward, a woman with the bearing of a military leader. I am Admiral Yunsu. The forces we banished beyond the galaxy's edge grow stronger in the darkness between worlds. They have had millions of years to prepare for their return, and they will see your awakening as a sign that the time for conquest has come. Another figure, a man in scholar's robes, continued the warning. I am historian Wu Jin. The races that now call themselves the elders of the galaxy have grown comfortable ruling with borrowed technology. They will view your return as a threat to be eliminated, not a homecoming to be celebrated. The final member of the council to speak was a young woman who seemed to radiate an inner strength that transcended her apparent age. I am So Young, the last engineer. We have prepared gifts for your return, technologies and knowledge that will help you reclaim your heritage. But remember, power without wisdom leads only to destruction. Do not repeat the mistakes that led to our fall. The hologram faded, leaving Do-hyun and his crew alone with the weight of their discovery. Humanity was not a young species stumbling into a galaxy dominated by ancient powers. They were the ancient power, returning to reclaim what had always been theirs. But as they prepared to return to Earth with their fine Dr. So Young, sat in the dimly lit archive chamber deep beneath New Geneva, surrounded by quantum storage devices that hummed with the accumulated knowledge of humanity's forgotten past. The Crystalline data cores recovered from 17 different beacon sites floated in perfect spheres of energy, their surfaces pulsing with patterns that seemed to shift and dance in response to her presence. For 3 months, she had worked to decode the ancient records, piecing together fragments of history that painted a picture so vast and terrible that she sometimes wondered if ignorance had been a blessing. The truth about humanity's ancient empire was nothing like the heroic narrative that people on Earth were beginning to embrace. "Computer, display the Seongjai files," she commanded. The archive responded by projecting a 3-dimensional timeline that filled the chamber with ghostly images of long-dead worlds and forgotten battles. At the center of the display stood the figure of a man whose very presence seemed to radiate ambition and ruthless intelligence. Seongjai, born on New Terra in the year 2947 of the First Empire, the computer's voice announced, brilliant scientist, charismatic leader, and architect of the great division that led to the collapse of human galactic civilization. So Young had studied the man's face for hundreds of hours, trying to understand how someone who had started as a pioneer and explorer could become the monster described in the ancient records. Seongjai had been one of the founders of the Galactic Survey Fleet, a man whose innovations in faster-than-light travel and terraforming technology had made humanity's expansion to the stars possible. "Display the early expansion records," she ordered. The chamber filled with images of vast human fleets spreading across the galaxy like seeds scattered by the wind. The ancient humans had been everything the current galaxy claimed to be, explorers and teachers who shared their knowledge freely with the primitive species they encountered. They had uplifted dozens of races, providing them with technology and guidance to help them develop their own civilizations. It was paradise, So Young whispered, watching scenes of humans working alongside aliens to build great cities and monuments to their shared achievements. But paradise had not lasted. The records showed how tensions began to develop as humanity's empire grew larger and more complex. Some humans began to view the alien races they had uplifted as children, who needed constant supervision. Others argued for complete equality and eventual independence for all species. Seongjai had been the most vocal advocate for what he called responsible stewardship. In his speeches, preserved in perfect detail by the quantum archives, he argued that humans had a duty to guide and protect the lesser races, even if that meant making decisions for them. "We created them," his image declared from a podium on ancient Terra Prime. "We lifted them from primitive barbarism and gave them the tools of civilization. Would you abandon a child to make its own decisions before it has learned wisdom? The galaxy is dangerous and our client species need our protection." The opposing view had been championed by General Unsu, a military leader whose reputation for fairness and honor had made her beloved throughout the human territories. Her speeches, recorded in the same archives, painted a very different vision of humanity's role in the galaxy. "We shared our knowledge because we believed in the potential of all sentient life," Yunsu had argued. But sharing knowledge is not the same as claiming ownership of those we help. Every species has the right to determine its own destiny, to make its own mistakes, and to learn its own lessons. Our role should be that of friends and advisors, not rulers. So Young advanced the timeline, watching as the philosophical differences hardened into political factions. The guardianship faction, led by Seongjai, gained support among humans who lived in the core worlds where contact with alien species was limited to carefully controlled interactions. The liberation faction, led by Unsu, drew its strength from the frontier regions where humans and aliens worked together as equals. The breaking point had come when several alien species petitioned for full independence from human oversight. The guardianship faction viewed this as dangerous rebellion that needed to be suppressed. The liberation faction saw it as the natural and desired outcome of successful uplift. "Display the Proxima incident," So Young commanded, though she dreaded what she was about to see. The archive showed the confrontation that had sparked the Civil War. A Xanthari colony ship, one of the first to be built entirely by non-human hands, had declared its intention to establish an independent settlement beyond the borders of human space. Seongjai had dispatched a fleet to intercept them, claiming that they were not ready for such responsibility. General Yunsu had arrived with her own ships to escort the Zenthari to their new home, leading to the first direct confrontation between human military forces in over 1,000 years. The standoff had lasted for days, with both fleets facing each other across the void while desperate negotiations tried to find a peaceful solution. The shooting had started when one of Seongjai's captains, convinced that Yunsu was about to attack, fired on a Zenthari vessel that was trying to leave the area. The ancient records showed the explosion in horrifying detail, the death of 3,000 innocent civilians who had simply wanted the freedom to choose their own path. Yunsu's response had been immediate and decisive. Her fleet had disabled the attacking ship and arrested its crew, then escorted the remaining Zenthari vessels to safety. But the damage was done. The galaxy watched as humans turned their weapons on each other for the first time in their history. "Show me the war," So Young said quietly. The chamber filled with images of battles fought across hundreds of worlds, human fleets clashing in the void between stars while alien civilizations watched in horror as their protectors and teachers destroyed each other. The war had lasted for nearly 2 centuries, drawing in every species and faction in the galaxy. Seongjai's forces had controlled the industrial core worlds and the majority of humanity's military infrastructure. His fleets were larger and better equipped, but they faced a crucial disadvantage. The alien species that they claimed to protect had largely sided with Eunsu's liberation faction. The irony was perfect, So Young mused as she watched Zenthari and Vorthak ships fighting alongside human vessels against Seongjai's armadas. The man who claimed to be protecting alien species found himself at war with them. The decisive moment had come when Yunsu made the most difficult decision in human history. Rather than allow Seongjai to claim victory and establish his vision of eternal human dominance, she chose to activate the Omega Protocol. "Display the Great Withdrawal," So Young commanded. The archive showed the systematic destruction of humanity's greatest achievements. Ancient Terra Prime, the capital world that had governed an empire spanning half the galaxy, was evacuated and then sterilized by antimatter charges. The great shipyards of New Shanghai were dismantled piece by piece, their components scattered across uninhabited systems. The hyperspace beacons that had made faster-than-light communication possible were shut down one by one, leaving entire sectors cut off from each other. Most importantly, the humans themselves began to disappear. Yunsu's faction retreated to the far edges of the galaxy, taking with them the knowledge and technology that Seongjai needed to maintain his empire. Without the infrastructure to support his vast fleets, without the cooperation of the alien species he claimed to protect, and without the loyalty of the human populations who had grown disgusted with the war, Seongjai's guardianship faction found itself ruling over empty ruins. "Show me the final confrontation," So Young whispered. The last battle had taken place in the system that would later be called the Dark Nebula, where Seongjai's remaining forces had gathered for one final attempt to restore their empire. But, instead of Yunsu's ships, they found themselves facing an armada of automated vessels controlled by artificial intelligence systems. "This is General Yunsu of the Liberation Fleet," came the recorded message that had been broadcast across all frequencies. "By the authority granted to me by the United Worlds Congress, I hereby banish the Guardianship faction and all those who follow them from this galaxy. Your crimes against the principle of free will and self-determination have forfeited your right to remain among civilized beings." The automated ships had not destroyed Seongjai's fleet, but they had herded them toward the galactic edge, using advanced technology to create a barrier that could not be crossed. The exile had been complete and permanent, or so the ancient humans had believed. "Display the memory wipe protocol," So Young said, her voice heavy with the weight of what she had learned. The final act of the liberation faction had been the most heartbreaking of all. To ensure that Seongjai could never use descendants of the human race to rebuild his empire, Yunsu had ordered the implementation of a galaxy-wide memory modification program. Every human who remained behind would have their memories altered, their knowledge of advanced technology removed, their awareness of their true history erased. The survivors were relocated to primitive worlds at the very edge of the galaxy, places, like Earth, where they could start over without the burden of their species' legacy. They would grow ings, the first reports The first ships of the Void Fleet materialized at the edge of the galaxy, like ghosts emerging from a nightmare. Commander Hyun-woo watched the sensor readings with growing dread as more and more vessels appeared on the long-range scanners, each one larger than the greatest battleships of the current galactic powers. "How many are we looking at?" he asked his tactical officer, Lieutenant Nam Ho. "Initial count shows 200 capital ships, sir, with at least 1,000 smaller vessels. But more are arriving every hour." Nam Ho's voice was steady, but Hyun-woo could see the fear in his eyes. Their technology signatures are definitely human, but the power readings are off the charts. Hyun-woo stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, humanity's newest and most advanced warship, and felt utterly insignificant. His ship was considered the pinnacle of human military engineering, but compared to what was approaching from the void, it might as well have been made of paper and wishes. The comm system crackled to life with an incoming transmission on all frequencies. The voice that emerged was human, speaking perfect Korean, but there was something cold and ancient about it that made everyone on the bridge shiver. "Children of the false Terra," the voice announced with casual contempt. "I am Admiral Wu Jin of the True Human Empire. You have played in the ruins of our civilization long enough. The time has come for the rightful heirs of the galaxy to reclaim their inheritance." Hyun-woo activated the response channel. "This is Commander Hyun-woo of the United Earth Space Force. Who are you and what do you want?" The laugh that came through the speakers was like ice cracking. "We are what you should have become, little cousins. We are humanity perfected, strengthened, by millions of years of purposeful evolution in the harshest environment imaginable. We are the Guardianship faction, and we have returned to finish what was started eons ago." On Proxima Station, the emergency session of the Galactic Council was in chaos. Representatives from dozens of species shouted at each other in their native languages, while translation systems struggled to keep up with the overlapping conversations. Ambassador Kyung-soo stood at his podium, trying to restore order, but the panic was spreading faster than his words could travel. "The Zenthari Third Fleet has been completely destroyed," reported Admiral Velkara, her usually composed demeanor cracked by shock. 17 ships, gone in less than 10 minutes. The attackers used weapons we've never seen before. "The Vorthak defense grid is offline," added collective speaker Mordan, his bark-like skin darkening with stress. "Our most advanced systems simply shut down when the enemy vessels approached. It's as if they have override codes for our own technology." Kyung-soo felt a chill of understanding. "Because they do. Our ancestors built the foundations that your civilizations are constructed on. These exiles know every system, every weakness, every backdoor that was programmed into the ancient human technology." The council chamber erupted in angry voices. The Rigelian delegate, a being that resembled a crystalline spider, clicked furiously at his translator. "You brought this upon us. Your species awakened these monsters." "We didn't know," Kyung-soo protested. "The ancient records were incomplete. We had no idea that the Guardianship faction had survived in exile." "Ignorance is not an excuse," snapped the Centauri ambassador. "Your people have doomed the galaxy with their reckless exploration." But not all voices were raised in accusation. From the upper tiers came a clear, strong voice that cut through the chaos like a sword through fog. "The humans are not our enemies." All eyes turned to see Yong-soo, a young Zenthari noble who had served as a liaison between his empire and the human colonies. He stood tall and proud, his ceremonial robes flowing around him like liquid starlight. "I have worked with humans for the past 5 years, Yong-soo continued, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. "I have seen their dedication to cooperation and peaceful coexistence. They did not choose to awaken these ancient evils, but now that the threat exists, they will stand with us to face it." "Pretty words," snarled the Vorthak speaker. "But what can your pet humans do against ships that can destroy our fleets with ease?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Captain Jae-hyun, who had been quietly listening to the debate from the human delegations section, stepped forward, with a datapad in his hands. "We've been analyzing the attack patterns and technology signatures," he announced. "The Void Fleet's ships are powerful, but they're also inflexible. They rely on brute force and technological superiority rather than tactical innovation. They expect their enemies to fight like the ancient humans did, with massive fleets clashing in open space. He activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy with various strategic points marked in different colors. But we've learned something they haven't. We've learned to work together. The current galactic civilization isn't just human or Zenthari or Vorthak. It's all of us, combining our strengths and covering each other's weaknesses. Meanwhile, at the galactic core, Dr. Minji worked frantically in the ancient archive, a massive installation hidden inside what appeared to be a dying star. The beacon network had revealed the location of this ultimate repository of human knowledge, but accessing it required genetic keys from all three factions of the original human empire. "The Loyalist codes are accepted," she reported to her team. "The Liberation faction archives are online." Her assistant, a young engineer named Kyung Min, looked up from his console with confusion. "Dr. Minji, we're getting readings from sectors that shouldn't exist. The archive is much larger than our initial scans indicated." Minji pulled up the expanded schematics and felt her breath catch. "It's not just an archive, it's a construction facility. The ancient humans built this place to manufacture something, but the project was never completed." The central chamber of the archive was dominated by a massive construction bay that stretched for kilometers in all directions. Partially assembled ships hung in zero gravity, their hulls gleaming with the same crystalline technology they had found at the beacon sites. "Genesis-class vessels," Minji read from the ancient database, "designed to be crewed by mixed species teams, incorporating the best technology and tactics from all members of the galactic community." The ships were beautiful, sleek designs that seemed to flow like living things rather than the angular, militaristic lines of traditional human warships. But they were also clearly unfinished, waiting for components and crew members that had never arrived. "Can we complete them?" asked Kyung Min. Minji studied the construction requirements and felt a spark of hope. Not with human technology alone, but if we could get support from the other galactic races, if we could work together like our ancestors, planned before the war tore them apart. The first major battle between the Void Fleet and the combined forces of the current galaxy took place in the Omega sector, where Admiral Wu Jin had chosen to make his grand demonstration of superiority. The ancient commander led his fleet against a hastily assembled armada of Zenthari, Vorthak, and human ships that had managed to coordinate their response. Captain Hyun Woo commanded the allied fleet from the bridge of his ship, with Zenthari, Admiral Corthana, and Vorthak battlespeaker Gralnath linked in through quantum communication arrays. The cooperation was awkward at first, with each species trying to implement their own tactical doctrines, but necessity forced them to adapt quickly. "Enemy fleet closing to engagement range," reported Lieutenant Namho. "They're not even trying to be subtle about it." The Void Fleet approached in perfect formation, their massive ships arranged in geometric patterns that spoke of absolute confidence in their technological superiority. Admiral Wu Jin's flagship, a vessel the size of a small moon, led the charge, with weapons that could crack planets. "All ships, remember the plan," Hyunwoo broadcast to the Allied fleet. "We're not trying to win this battle. We're trying to learn from it." The engagement was over in less than an hour, and the results were exactly what the Allies had expected. The Void Fleet's weapons were devastating, capable of destroying the largest Allied ships with single shots. Their defenses were equally impressive, shrugging off attacks that should have been fatal, but they also fought exactly as Captain Jae-hyun had predicted, like the ancient humans of millions of years ago. They relied on overwhelming firepower and superior technology, rather than innovative tactics or cooperative strategies. "They're treating us like we're still fighting the old war," Hyunwoo observed, as he watched the enemy ships methodically destroy his allies. "They expect us to meet them head-on with everything we've got." Admiral Corthana, her ship burning but still functional, transmitted her agreement. "They are powerful, but they are also predictable. We can use this." The evacuation signal went out and the Allied fleet scattered in all directions, using every evasion tactic they had learned from centuries of trading with dangerous species and avoiding pirates in remote sectors. The Void Fleet could have pursued and destroyed them all, but Admiral Wu Jin chose to let them go. "Let them run," his voice echoed across the communication channels. "Let them carry word of our power to every corner of the galaxy. Opposition is futile. The true human empire will reclaim what was always ours, and this time, we will not make the mistake of showing mercy to inferior beings. Back at the ancient archive, Dr. Minji made a discovery that changed everything. The Genesis protocol activation chamber hummed with energy as three very different beings worked side by side at the ancient control panels. Hanul, the young human engineer, ran her fingers across displays that responded to her genetic code with eager recognition. Beside her, Ara, a Vorthak technician whose bark-like skin glowed with bioluminescent patterns of concentration, interfaced directly with the organic components of the system. On her other side stood Dongmin, a Zenthari warrior whose traditional hostility toward humans had been replaced by grudging respect earned through months of cooperation. The primary systems are online, Hanul reported, sweat beading on her forehead despite the chamber's cool temperature. But I'm reading massive power fluctuations. This thing wasn't designed to be activated by just 3 people. Ara's translator rendered her clicking speech into standard galactic common. The biological components are responding, but they require more diverse genetic inputs. The ancient humans designed this system to work only when multiple species cooperate, fully. Dongmin adjusted his ceremonial armor and checked the quantum communicator that linked him to the combined fleet gathering outside the archive. The Void Fleet is less than 6 hours away. If we're going to do this, we need to do it now. Throughout the ancient archive, similar scenes were playing out as mixed teams of technicians and engineers worked to bring the Genesis ships online. The vessels were marvels of cooperative engineering, incorporating Zenthari crystalline computing systems, Vorthak bio-neural networks, and human quantum processing cores into a seamless whole. But the real innovation wasn't in the technology. It was in the requirement that the ships could only function with truly integrated crews. Each Genesis vessel needed a minimum of 12 beings from at least 4 different species, and every major decision had to be approved by consensus rather than hierarchy. Captain Sung Ho, who had made the original discovery on Kepler 442c, found himself commanding the first completed Genesis ship with a crew that would have been unthinkable just months before. His first officer was Zenthari, his tactical officer was Vorthak, his chief engineer was human, and his communications specialist was from the crystalline Rigelian species. This is either going to be the greatest moment in galactic history, he muttered to himself as he watched his mixed crew work with an efficiency that surprised even him, or the shortest. The Void Fleet approached the galactic core like a storm of dark metal and ancient fury. Admiral Wu Jin stood on the bridge of his massive flagship, studying the readings that showed the pathetic defensive fleet that had assembled to oppose him. A mere 50 ships hastily constructed and crewed by the mongrel races that had inherited the galaxy in humanity's absence. They think their cooperation makes them strong, he said to his tactical officer, a human whose genetic modifications made him barely recognizable as belonging to the same species as the current inhabitants of Earth. They will learn that unity without power is merely organized weakness. But as the Void Fleet closed to weapons range, something unexpected happened. The Genesis ships began to sing. It started as a low harmonic tone that resonated through the quantum communication networks, but quickly grew into something that sounded almost like music. Each ship contributed its own voice to the chorus, creating a symphony of cooperation that the ancient systems recognized and responded to. "What is that noise?" demanded Wu Jin. His communications officer, equally modified and equally loyal to the guardianship ideology, studied his instruments with growing confusion. "It appears to be some form of quantum resonance pattern, sir. Our systems are having difficulty processing it." The Genesis ships moved with a grace that defied their size, flowing around each other like dancers in a performance choreographed by mathematics itself. Their weapons, when they fired, did so with perfect timing and coordination, creating interference patterns that amplified their destructive power far beyond what any single ship should have been capable of producing. The first salvo from the Genesis fleet struck the leading edge of the Void Fleet with devastating effect. Ships that had been designed to shrug off the combined firepower of entire planetary defense systems simply ceased to exist. their molecular bonds disrupted by weapons that worked on principles the guardianship faction had never encountered. Impossible, Wu Jin breathed. Our shields should have stopped that. On the bridge of the lead Genesis ship, Captain Sung Ho felt the harmony of his crew's cooperation flowing through the ship's systems like a living thing. When Tactical Officer Velsera suggested a flanking maneuver, and Engineer Hanul confirmed that the ship's quantum drives could handle the stress, and Communications Specialist Trilla verified that the other ships could coordinate the movement. The decision was made by unanimous agreement in seconds, rather than the minutes it would have taken a traditional command structure. All ships execute Pattern Harmony 7, Sung Ho broadcast, knowing that every other Genesis captain would interpret the order through the lens of their own crew's unique capabilities. The Genesis fleet moved like a living organism, each ship adapting its role to support the whole while maintaining perfect communication with the others. It was warfare as art, strategy as music, cooperation elevated to the level of spiritual experience. Admiral Wu Jin watched his superior fleet being systematically dismantled by an enemy that should have been no match for his ancient technology. But as the battle progressed, he began to understand what he was facing. They're not fighting like humans, he realized aloud. They're fighting like something entirely new. The revelation came too late to save his fleet, but not too late to save his pride. With a gesture, he activated the Void Fleet's final protocol, the one measure that the Guardianship faction had hoped never to use. All ships implement Omega Purge, he commanded. If we cannot reclaim our galaxy, then we will ensure that no one else can have it either. The surviving Void Fleet ships began to converge on a single point in space, their hulls glowing with the buildup of energies that could crack a star. It was a suicide attack on a scale that could sterilize entire sectors of the galaxy, a final act of spite from beings who had never learned that destruction was not the same as victory. But they had forgotten something crucial about the current inhabitants of the galaxy. These people had learned from the mistakes of the past, and they had prepared for this possibility. Deep within the ancient archive, Chan Ho awakened from his million-year sleep. The quantum consciousness of the last surviving member of the original Liberation faction had been waiting for this exact moment, when the choice between cooperation and destruction would determine the galaxy's future. My children, his voice echoed through every Genesis ship simultaneously, speaking in a dozen different languages to crews that had learned to think as one. The time has come for the final lesson. Power without wisdom leads to destruction, but wisdom without power leads to slavery. You have learned to combine both. Now show the galaxy what humanity was always meant to become. The Genesis protocol's true purpose was finally revealed. The ships hadn't been built just to fight the Void Fleet. They had been built to redeem them. As the ancient enemy prepared their final, suicidal assault, the Genesis fleet did something that no one expected. They opened their weapons ports and transmitted surrender codes on all frequencies. What are they doing? Demanded Admiral Wu Jin. The answer came not from his own sensors, but from the combined quantum network that linked every Genesis ship. Captain Sung Ho's voice, supported by the harmonized agreement of dozens of mixed crews, reached across the void to the command deck of the ancient flagship. Admiral Wu Jin of the Guardianship faction, he said with quiet dignity, we are not your enemies. We are your descendants, and we have come to bring you home. The transmission that followed was not a weapon or a threat, but something far more powerful. It was a data stream containing the complete history of the current galactic civilization, showing the ancient exile exactly what his faction's absence had allowed to flourish. Wu Jin watched in stunned silence as the records showed species working together to solve problems that had once seemed impossible. He saw Zenthari and Vorthak colonies where different races lived side by side in genuine harmony. He saw human settlements where ancient enemies had become trusted friends. He saw a galaxy that had learned to grow beyond the mistakes of its past. This is impossible, he whispered. Inferior species cannot achieve such coordination without superior guidance. They are not inferior, came the gentle voice of Chan Ho, transmitted through the quantum network directly to the ancient admiral's mind. And we are not superior. We are all children of the same galaxy, learning the same lessons, making the same mistakes, and growing in the same direction. The only difference is that some of us learned sooner than others. The quantum purge began to affect the Void Fleet's targeting systems, but not in the way Admiral Wu Jin expected. Instead of being destroyed, the ancient programming that had maintained the Guardianship faction's rigid ideology for millions of years began to dissolve, replaced by something far more flexible and adaptive. For the first time in eons, Wu Jin felt doubt creep into his certainty. The beings he had